All right, everybody, welcome back to the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by 26shirts.com/Pittsburgh. And it is definitely the off season for the Steelers, but there is still a ton of stuff going on related to guys in the Hall of Fame and coaching moves. And of course, the playoffs are still going on. Well, thankfully, without teams named the Ravens or Patriots. But anyway, we're going to talk a lot of things Steelers tonight. Joining me is Ian and Ben, and we'll do our best to give you some good, honest perspective. And I did get a couple comments from folks this week, really positive stuff about the show. So please keep leaving reviews and good ratings and all that. And I mean, hey, if you don't like it, you don't like it. Go listen to something else, I guess, too. But we do a pretty good job. Anyway, Ian, how's things going for you tonight?
Great. Happy to be here.
Awesome. And Ben, you've made it through a rainstorm there in the Pacific Northwest?
Yeah, it was a little touch and go on the way home, but yep, did it.
Yeah, it's crazy weather. Raining here in Michigan when it should be snowing to beat the band, but I'm not going to complain because I believe, as you mentioned, one does not shovel rainwater, and nope. I'm just fine with that. So today, the news dropped that Donnie Shell, the great Steelers safety of the 70s teams, and a lot of people forget he actually played until 1987. Came in that great 74 draft and played up until 87, and 5 Pro Bowls, 3 All-Pro teams. But he was inducted today, or will be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, So we'll chat about him a little bit first, and then we'll get over to Coach Cowher, who was the first of this new centennial class to be inducted. Ian, I know of the three of us, you're the youngest, but what are some of the things that you recall about Donnie Shell?
I think the biggest thing that stands out, and I fully recognize that he played in a different era, but just how many interceptions he had and how consistent he was over time. I think he had 5+ interceptions in 5 or 6 straight seasons and 51 for his career. Like, those numbers are just unheard of. I mean, Stephon Gilmore led the league with 6 interceptions this year. So I know, playing in the 70s and early 80s was a different time for passing offenses. There's a lot more interceptions to be had, but also just, his consistency and ability to find the ball in the secondary, speaks volumes was at the back end of that Steelers defense that, won the 4 Super Bowls.
Yeah, and you make the good point about the generations because obviously teams throw the ball way more today than they did back then. So for him to have that many interceptions is pretty remarkable. Ben, what do you recall about number 31?
He was always around the ball. I mean, always. The guy was always. He just had a head for the ball. You've heard that expression over and over again. Yeah, there were a lot of turnovers. 51 picks over, what is it, a 13-year career?
Yeah.
That's a lot of picks. Also collected 19 fumbles. So you're talking about 70 turnovers over the course of his career. That's a lot, doing a whole lot for your team. So that's the thing that kind of really jumps out to me. I've thought for a long time that he was overshadowed by the talent on his team, and it was just assumed that he was so good because he was just taking whatever was left from the other guys, whatever the other guys didn't take, and that other offenses had to scheme so much to try and beat the Lamberts and the Hams and Joe Green and LC Greenwood that Donnie Shell was just kind of an afterthought, and that he was successful because of that. And that wasn't the case. When a guy is around the ball that much, it's not about luck.
Yeah.
It's about preparation. It's about knowledge and instinct. And he was over and over and over again. And the guy was a hell of a player. I'm happy for him. I'm pleased he got in while he's still alive. I thought what would happen is, just like LC Greenwood, he would probably get in after he was dead. I'm surprised that Greenwood wasn't a finalist, at least a finalist, for the Centennial class, but he was not.
Well, it's a good point, and I did want to address that because Donnie Shell becomes the 10th member of the great 70s teams to go in the Hall of Fame, and there is a lot of speculation that he's probably the last one. Look, there's a lot of Steelers fans that do believe, as you said, that L.C. Greenwood should be in there as well, and sadly, he has passed on. Ian, do you think this is it? Is this the last of the 70s guys to go into the Hall?
I don't know. I'll never say never, and I'm going to get into this some more later when we talk about Bill Cowher and some of the coaches that got in as well. But
right.
I mean, the NFL loves to do these sort of one-off special events, right? 100th year of football, they have a special centennial class. Do they do another one at the 125th, 150th? The Pro Football Hall of Fame was founded in 1963. Maybe there's a 100th year of the Hall of Fame class in 2063 if football's still around then. But they love to do these sort of special classes and drum up extra publicity and I'm sure that the TV ratings and those videos of Cowher and Jimmy Johnson getting their notice that they're going to get in on live television were shared all over the place. I mean, that's a lot of free publicity for the NFL.
Definitely.
So I mean, I don't think Greenwood will get in as part of any regular class, but I think if they do, and they also have done in the past sort of a special like one historical person gets in every year too. So I mean, it may come around.
That's the other thing is he may get
will.
nominated by the seniors committee, and typically they get 2 nominations, and generally speaking, those guys get in. But to your point about there being so many Steelers from those 70s teams already in the Hall, that's what Greenwood has working against him.
Yep. And I think it's what Donnie Shell had working against him for a long time too. And I think wasn't it Mel Blount that basically, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said it's a crime that he's not in.
But Mel also made the case, and I agree with him, that it was just like Swan and Stallworth. They were stealing votes from one another. Shell and Greenwood were stealing votes from one another. And so there are some people that think that now that Shell has gotten in, that maybe Greenwood's got a shot. Unfortunately, L.C. Greenwood's passed on, so he doesn't get in there while he's alive. He doesn't get to enjoy that honor while he's still walking around.
Yeah, and again, we're all believers that Shell was very worthy, and if you listen to opponents of his talk today about his nomination and eventual induction, they said much of the same. And just a couple other notes on the class. Steve Sable of NFL Films, he and his father Ed Sable started NFL Films, and I mean, Ian, NFL Films was like a part of my life as a kid, and I'm sure it probably was for you guys too, right? I mean, Steve Sable is more than deserving here.
Absolutely, I had VHS tapes I would watch over and over as a kid. With, it was historic footage. It was awesome.
Well, they were showing some of the footage today, and I had to laugh at some of Steve Sable's outfits. Some of his 80s button downs and his really bad, loud colored ties and stuff.
Yeah, and his dad was already in the Hall of Fame. Ed Sable who started it, but it was really Steve Sable that developed it and made it into what it became. And I could not agree with you more. I mean, he had a huge impact on the game because of what it did to all of us growing up and building on the popularity of what was already a pretty popular league, and now is the most, obviously the most popular game in America.
Yeah, definitely. And the former commissioner Tagliabue got in, and then the one I had to laugh about was not that he maybe wasn't deserving, but Cowboy safety Cliff Harris got in. And I mean, did you guys immediately, like me, think of Jack Lambert in Super Bowl 10?
Yeah, and I'm kind of surprised Tagliabue got in too, to be honest with you.
I was too.
There were a lot of. I think the Blue Ribbon panel put him in on purpose because they knew that the voters would not put him in. Yeah, because there are a handful of guys that have an axe to grind against him and just refuse to vote for him. Yeah, Cliff Harris getting basically being picked up and spiked to the ground by Jack Lambert. Yeah, that was a great moment. What's really funny is the ref walking away from Lambert going, yep, I didn't see it.
Yeah, I didn't see anything.
I didn't see a damn thing. I'm not saying a word. And Harris stands up right away and throws his hands up like, aren't you going to? Nope, not saying it. Nope.
Yeah. For any of you that don't know what we're talking about, you need to go back and watch the Super Bowl 10 highlights right after the missed kick.
That was when I became a Steelers fan.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean.
That was the game. My old man, it was a Cowboys fan, and he was all fired up and telling me how they were going to win, Roger Staubach and blah, blah. And I was like, I'm a little kid. I don't know shit. Don't know dick about dick. And I'm just like, nope. The guys in the black hats are going to win. And they did. And I've been a Steelers fan ever since.
That's beautiful.
Go figure. It's a dumb story, but people are always entertained by it. I'm like, no, it's dumb. It's true.
No, we all tell our how did you become a fan stories, and I agree. I think they're probably dumb to ourselves, but everybody seems to like them. You're right.
Yeah.
Good for Donnie Shell
and Harris, man.
Webster's dad. How exciting is that?
Yeah. I was like, so wait, Alex Karras gets in, but Drew Pearson doesn't.
Well, and you could say the same for Harold Carmichael too.
Yeah.
I think Pearson was more decorated as a player.
Both of them.
I
don't get it.
Didn't Karras have some gambling issues one season? I know it was Paul Hornung, but I thought he was maybe not. I thought he was involved with that.
He was suspended for one season with Hornung. That's right.
Yeah.
But I thought he played for the Lions his whole career.
He might have finished with somebody else.
Maybe.
But I thought it was it was predominantly the Lions. But anyway, I do want to get on to Coach William Laird Cowher.
One final note on the Centennial class. I'm really glad that Art Modell did not get in. He does not deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
I was saving that till later, but
I got to agree with you, man. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw one to the Browns fans. Modell ruined what was once a fantastic rivalry.
He did.
And he moved all that hatred to Baltimore, and that's why we hate the Ravens now.
Yeah. And, just again, if you don't know the whole story, Art Modell was the owner of the Cleveland Browns and decided to move his franchise to Baltimore, which, of course, had seen their Colts leave for Indianapolis. So the Baltimore folks were ecstatic. But, the Browns were left, the Cleveland folks were left with nothing until they eventually came back. And obviously, Cleveland fans not very happy with Art Modell, so they were thrilled, while Ravens fans are upset that he didn't get in. And my only contention is I don't think owners should be in, period. They make enough money, they can build their own shrines.
It depends on whether or not they actually made big contributions to the game.
True. What's the impact? I get it.
Like Hallis. I mean, how do you keep that guy out of the Hall of Fame?
Well, I mean, you could say Paul Brown and some of these. I get it. I get it. I just, I think sometimes we just honor these guys simply because they
now,
have name
I agree with you. Jerry Jones getting into the Hall of Fame is a fucking joke. A fucking joke. What did he do?
A PG rating.
Yeah,
what did he do? He came up with the best merchandising techniques in the NFL. Really? That contributed to the game? He's not even a good GM. He's terrible. He's terrible. He
contributed to his pocketbook. That's what he contributed to. Anyway, let's get on to Bill Cowher. Bill, congratulations to Coach Cowher. Great story. Training camp the year I got married, and my wife. We saw Bill coming over to the side there where the fence is in Latrobe, and my wife grabbed my hat and my Sharpie, and she just disappeared into the crowd. And not 20 seconds later, she came back. She had Cowher's signature on my hat, and she said, "Oh, we had a great conversation. He asked how I was doing. I said, great, how are you?" And he said, "I'm loving it." And we just kept talking. I said, "You did all that in 20 seconds? And she said, "Sure." So I've still got the hat stuck to my wall here in my fortress of Steelertude. But I'm glad for him, and I'm going to let you guys, give your thoughts before we really analyze this. So, Ian, your thoughts on his eventual induction here.
Yeah. So my initial thought is, as you already mentioned, I'm sort of the youngest person here. I'm 34 years old, was born in the mid 80s. But,
Yeah.
This was kind of special to me, kind of like Jerome Bettis was getting in was special, just because, this was Dermani Dawson getting in was special. This was kind of the guy who really formed my,
yeah.
Steeler fandom. I kind of barely remember the last few years of the Chuck Noll era. I think the first Steeler game I really can remember watching was that playoff game against the Oilers. I think in '89. I remember watching it on our fuzzy basement television with rabbit ears, which rabbit ears in a basement's never a good idea. Anyways, but at any rate, I was 6 years old in 1992 when Cowher kind of, took over the helm of the team, and really a lot of my having season tickets, a lot of my formative, young age years were spent at Three River Stadium at Heinz Field, then watching, Cowher's teams. So it does have kind of a special meaning to me as a Steelers fan. All that, and I'm really happy for him.
Yeah.
All that being said, I'm kind of surprised he got in. His whole career resume, it's good, but it's not great. I mean, he has made 2 Super Bowls in 15 years. He won 1. That's awesome. He won 8 division titles, made the playoffs 10 times. But, when guys like George Seifert aren't in the Hall of Fame yet, it seems kind of weird that like Bill Cowher got in. I mean, I'm really happy for him. I'm ecstatic, but you know what I'm saying.
I do, and we'll break this down a little bit more, but I want to get Ben's initial thoughts here on Cowher going in.
Well, a lot like my naysaying friend over there who just introduced this. I'm surprised that he got in, and I've always thought of Cowher as a good coach.
Yep.
Just not a great coach. Not necessarily somebody who was Hall of Fame worthy. He had that stretch, and I know a lot of people have completely blanked that out because Cowher won a Super Bowl and now he's the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
But, 1998 through 2003, 6 seasons, Cowher had a pretty rough stretch there. 98, it started 5-2. They won a big game on Monday night in Kansas City. I was at that game. And
shameless plug.
Yeah, it's great. It was a really loud stadium, incredibly loud, nice stadium. The people were rude as hell. Steelers won. I wasn't sure we were going to get out of there alive. I'm not exaggerating. They were pissed. And the Steelers, it looked like the Steelers were going to have they'd gone to the AFC Championship the year before, and lost. Bills. Was that his second? That was his second home AFC Championship game loss, where he was favored.
Yep.
And they started 5-2, and everything was looking rosy. And then the season collapsed, and they finished 7-9 and missed the playoffs. And that was when people started going, "Well, he's lost the team." Okay,
of course.
That was 98. 99, they were 6-10, missed the playoffs again. 2000, they finished 9-7.
Three Rivers.
Yeah, they finished. Yep. They finished with a winning record at 9-7, but they missed the playoffs again. Okay.
Yep.
The year after that, 2001, Cordell makes the Pro Bowl AFC Championship game. That was the third of the home AFC Championship game losses in Bill Cowher's career.
That was the brutal one where the the wide receiver ran out of bounds on the 70-yard punt, and we had to bring it back, and they put it on the opposite hash mark from where it had been, and New England returned it for
Troy Brown.
Brown, yeah.
Let me see. The season after that, they were 10-5-1. That was the year they tied the Falcons. Remember that game?
When Plaxico Burress got tackled at the 1-yard line, and Joe Nedney won an Oscar for his playoff performance.
Yep, that was fantastic. And they lost in the divisional round so they made the playoffs 2 years in a row there after missing it 3 years in a row previous to that. So now he's got
That was also the year of the big comeback against the Browns in the wild card round, 2006.
Yeah, Fumatu.
Yeah. Yep. So he's got 2 playoff appearances in 5 seasons there. The year after that, they went 6-10. They were
Tommy
horrible
Gun
again.
Offense.
What?
That was the year they put Tommy Maddox at quarterback and tried to throw the ball over the yard.
Anyway,
it was
so
terrible.
they finished 6-10. They finished 6-10 that year, and this is kind of where I'm going with it. He had a run where he had 6 years in a row. 6 years, 2 of which he made the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Then they get to draft Ben, and things change.
Right.
But people are blocking this out as though Cowher was a really outstanding coach. I've always thought of him as a good coach. I didn't think he had much to work with in some of those years, but I don't think that he was a great coach. I don't think he was a Hall of Fame caliber coach. I'm glad he got in. It's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it changes my perspective on what a Hall of Fame coach is.
I am with both of you. I love Coach Cowher. I love the fire he coached with. I just enjoyed him as a coach, but I never, ever, ever viewed him as a Hall of Fame coach. I like you just said, he was a good coach, but Hall of Fame, no. I view Hall of Fame coaches as guys that win multiple titles, and at the very least. And but like you guys too, I'm thrilled for him. Watching that moment was tremendous the other night. And like you, Ian, I go back to when he was, storming the sidelines, and I think of some great moments there. And unfortunately, I remember 4 AFC home championship games that were losses. And my goodness,
I was at all 4 of them. Yes.
Well, then you feel it worse than me.
Yeah.
And he darn nearly lost a 5th if that Hail Mary's completed. So I don't want to take anything away from him, but it's a great honor and everything. But yeah, I was surprised that he got in. Now, Ian,
can I ask you a question here?
Oh,
yeah,
sure.
Real quick though, do you think him being on television had any impact on the voters and him helping him get in?
Absolutely.
Maybe. I mean, and people have said the same thing about Jimmy Johnson. Did they select Jimmy Johnson and Bill Cowher so that they could honor them on television and hype this centennial class? And there may be something to that.
Sure,
I don't know.
I wasn't thinking about that. I was just thinking his contributions to, all the pregame shows over the years after coaching, have also kind of helped build up the game.
No, hell no. Absolutely not. So does James Brown deserve to be in? Does Fran Tarkenton deserve to be in for calling all those games? What about Howard Cosell? Hell no. No.
Look at him go. There's my Howard Cosell impersonation. I think it helps in terms of the, especially some of the voters who maybe didn't know Bill Cowher, and then they see him on TV and they either decide they like him or they don't like him. I think in that regard, but no. Now I agree with Ben in the sense that no, it doesn't make a difference, or it shouldn't have made a difference as to whether or not he got in.
I agree. It shouldn't have. I was just asking the question.
Yeah. If he's not a TV personality, does he get in? I would say his chances are less. Yeah, maybe. I would. Ian, I know you enjoy getting a rise out of folks. Especially when it's done with actual accurate numbers and facts. So you made the argument to us and then put it into an article for SteelCityBlitz.com that based on this, that Mike Tomlin is pretty much assured of getting into the Hall of Fame. So explain yourself.
Okay, I will be happy to. So, and I'm gonna couch all this up front by saying that I'm not saying Tomlin's going to get inducted right away after he retires. Bill Cowher retired 13 years ago and had to wait for a special centennial class to get in. I mentioned earlier in the show that you never know when the NFL will do more of these special centennial classes or what's going to happen in this, or what's going to happen in the future. Depending on how many more years Tomlin coaches, even if he has to wait another 10 to 15 years after he retires to get in. Like, my argument is, at some point in time, I think Tomlin's going to get in. And really, his resume is very similar to Cowher's. And I know there's a lot of people out there that think Tomlin should be fired or are concerned about our performances in the last 5 years, 7 years, 9 years. I've seen 9 years a lot, which is a funny thing to me because that, they're not looking at the last decade, because if they look at all 10 years, they have to include that Super Bowl appearance, and they want to, selectively, choose their data. But nevertheless, the Pro Football Hall of Fame is going to look at your complete and total body of work. They're not going to look at, what did you do? Did you do something earlier in your career versus later, or when did it happen? I mean, Bill Cowher didn't win a Super Bowl until his penultimate season. Mike Tomlin won a Super Bowl in his second season. So the Hall of Fame is just going to look at total body of work. And when you look at them side by side, at least for right now, Tomlin has a better winning percentage by about 2%. It's 64% to 62%. Overall, during Cowher's 15-year tenure, the Steelers had the best record of any team in the league. During Tomlin's 13-year tenure, the Steelers have the second best record. Only New England, who's been historically good, was better. Cowher won 8 division titles. Tomlin's won 6. Cowher made 10 playoff appearances. Tomlin's won 8. Cowher was 12-9 in the playoffs, with about 57% winning percentage. Tomlin's 8-7, which is about a 53% winning percentage. So, I mean, the anti-Tomlin crowd wants to argue that Tomlin's only one game over 500, but really he's only 4 percentage points behind Cowher as far as playoff record goes. Both of them have made 2 Super Bowls and won 1. Cowher had 3 losing seasons, as Ben just laid out. Tomlin's never had a losing season, which some people doesn't think matters. But if you look at the Pro Football Hall of Fame website, there's guys on there that have specifically listed in their bios never had a losing season. So that is something that the Pro Football Hall of Fame likes to promote and take into consideration. So Tomlin does have also, in addition to Cowher, a better resume than some guys that are currently in the Hall of Fame. George Allen, who coached for the Redskins and the Rams, was 2-7 in the playoffs, never won a championship. Tomlin has a better resume than he does, and that guy's in the Hall of Fame. So I think, like Ben said, Cowher getting in does somewhat change the standard for what a Hall of Fame coach is. And with that changed standard, I think Tomlin gets in at some point in time.
Yeah, I agree, and Ben, I'll hand it over to you. I don't want to start predicting too much about Mike Tomlin, because I'm hopeful that things get turned around, and him being around longer means great success for the Steelers. So hopefully that's a long way off. But do you think Cowher getting in does increase his chances of getting in?
I have no idea, but me. Look, I like Mike Tomlin. I think he's a good football coach. I have never seen him as a Hall of Fame worthy coach, Hall of Fame caliber coach.
So very similar to Cowher then. Yeah.
And Tomlin, acknowledges as much. He what did he say? I use the word great, very seldom. And there are just a handful of guys that you can apply the word great to. And I'm not one of them. I'm just a guy who goes to work and works hard at his craft and tries to get better. And I'm not there yet. I'm not great. And one of the guys he pointed at as a great coach was Belichick and Popovich in San Antonio. So, I mean, basically what he's saying is I'm not in that rarefied company. And I agree with him. And I
agree with that too, just for the record.
Yeah, I didn't think that Bill Cowher was either. I don't know that this changes anything. And here's why. The people that voted on the Centennial class were a special group of blue ribbon panel contributors to the game of football who don't vote on the regular classes. Right.
Very important distinction.
They don't vote on the regular classes. And the regular voters, aren't going to vote for a lot of the guys that got in this class. I don't know how else to put that. I think it's fair. I think Jimmy Johnson would have eventually gotten in. I think he would have on the strength of the fact that when he started in Dallas, he was both head coach and GM. He didn't have the title of GM, but he had all that responsibility. He had the ability to do whatever he wanted with football operations. That's eventually why he and Jerry split, because Jerry wanted to take some power back from him, and he went, nope. If you take any of my power, I'm walking. And they couldn't work it out. But when he started there, they were 1-15, and 5 years later they had 2 rings. That's huge. It's a huge accomplishment. I mean, it's that alone in 5 years is massive. He started out, they were the worst team in the league, and 5 years later, they're a 2-time winner. He leaves, and Barry Switzer takes over, and Barry Switzer sucked.
Switzer won with Jimmy's players, let's be honest.
Won. Yeah, I mean, he did. Those guys won. The team he built won another championship after he was gone.
Yeah.
They were that good. So, I don't think you can make that case with Cowher's team that he won Super Bowl 40 with, because he won a Super Bowl with them, and then he went 8-8 with them, and then the next year they went 10-6.
10-6.
And after that they won a Super Bowl. But
right,
12-4, yeah.
Yeah, but when you look at the 53 guys in that roster in, was it 2003? No, excuse me. 2008, yes. 53 guys in that roster. You look at, I'll give you 2 good examples. Woodley was a pick after Cowher was gone.
Right.
And James Harrison was a guy who was buried in the depth chart when Cowher was around. He was stuck behind Porter, and Cowher didn't play him. And the guy was a defensive player of the year caliber guy, and Cowher wouldn't put him on the field. I mean, that's just 2 examples. That 2008 team had 22 players that were Cowher drafted players.
Right.
Of the 53. So I don't buy that example. Never have. I think it's stupid. In 2010, there were 8 players left that were Cowher drafted players. 8. And they won the AFC that year. So don't hand me that crap. There's too much turnover now in rosters.
Yep.
Every year. It's completely different now than it was when Cowher was, and so much different than when Noel was around. If Noel chose good players, what was it? Plan B free agency. They didn't really have much ability to move around those guys. Right. If you drafted well, you were going to have a lot of success for a decade. Now, guys move around constantly.
Yeah, no.
Speaking of draft picks, all right. So here's the thing I hear, quite often that I've, gotten feedback when talking with the, I'll say, anti-Mike Tomlin crowd. When you bring up Bill Cowher and how similar their records are, their point is always that, Cowher never had a franchise quarterback until the end, which, okay, young Ben Roethlisberger, a little different than older Ben Roethlisberger, but here's the other point. Bill Cowher was the coach for 12 drafts before they selected Ben Roethlisberger and picked 7 quarterbacks in those 12 drafts. Only one, Cordell Stewart, was picked before the 5th round. Everyone else was 5th round or later. They picked Cornelius Brown in 92, Alex Van Pelt in 93, Jim Miller in 94, Stewart in 95, Spence Fisher in 96, T. Martin in 2000, with Tom Brady still on the board, by the way, and Brian St. Pierre in 2003. So 7 quarterbacks in 12 drafts, only one before round 5. So if Cowher didn't have a franchise quarterback, it's because he and his GMs or director of player personnel, because the Steelers didn't have a GM title at the time, but they didn't prioritize the position. They didn't pick one. I fully recognize he had Neil O'Donnell, when he got there. That was a carryover from the end of the Noel years. But O'Donnell left in 96. That's still 8 drafts before they took Ben Roethlisberger. And to cap it all off, Bill Cowher wanted to draft Sean Andrews, an offensive lineman from Arkansas, instead of taking the franchise quarterback that won him and Mike Tomlin the Super Bowl. So
Cowher had to
go ahead.
Cowher had to be talked into taking Roethlisberger. He didn't want to, and it was because it was an era where you could run the ball and play good defense and win. And you want to know how I know that? The Steelers proved it for me. I don't need to prove it to anybody who's listening, because in Super Bowl 40, Ben completed 9 passes. 9! And they won the game. So don't give me that you need a franchise quarterback to win a Super Bowl crap, because the Steelers have already proved that you don't.
Yeah. Well, guys, we've had an excellent Hall of Fame talk. I do want to get in just a bit of kind of current event stuff with the Steelers here before we wrap things up on the show. The Steelers this past year, of course, had Randy Fichtner as the offensive coordinator, and he also retained his title as quarterback's coach. And there was a lot of speculation, from you guys as well, that maybe they need to go back to the days of a separate OC and a separate quarterback's coach. So no surprise then that today they announced that Matt Canada is going to come in and be the quarterback's coach. Now, Matt Canada, and Ian, you pointed this out today in our discussions, that he led Pitt in 2016 as the offensive coordinator to a ridiculously prolific offensive season where, they never scored less than 24 points in a game. And just tremendous numbers and everything. But the guy has been around. He started his coaching career in the mid-90s. He's been Indiana, Butler, Northern Illinois, Indiana, Northern Illinois, Wisconsin, NC State, Pittsburgh, LSU, and Maryland in 2018. He was not coaching this past year. So, Ben, let me swing it to you. What are your thoughts on this hire in terms of what you expect from it?
I don't expect a lot. Matt Canada is, as you pointed it out today, we were talking on Slack. He's a bit of a football vagabond. He moves around constantly, and it kind of makes you a little leery of how long he's going to stick. But he's known as an innovative guy by some college football fans. I don't expect him to have much input into the offensive scheme for two reasons. One, we've got a 37-year-old quarterback, soon to be 38.
Yeah.
And he and his coordinator are comfortable with what they're running now. And I don't expect a great deal of change. And also because he's the quarterback's coach. He's a position coach. He's not a coordinator. He's not going to be able to say, I want to be the passing game coordinator. And don't get me wrong, all those position coaches have some input on the game plan.
Sure.
But they don't get to decide. That's just not the way it works. So I don't expect a great deal to change.
Yeah.
However, I am glad that they went ahead and they hired a quarterback's coach because they needed to. They needed to do something it was evident this year that our young quarterbacks were lost.
Yeah.
And that they weren't getting enough attention during the course of the week, during the preparation phases, to be able to go out there and properly execute. And, I basically blame that on two things. One, I'm not that enamored with Randy Fichtner, but also, you got a guy who's splitting duties. He's trying to coordinate the entire offense and also coach a position. It's not really all that effective, I don't think. So, maybe you can do that in college. In the pros, just isn't that easy. Even this year with Keith Butler coaching the outside linebackers and also coordinating the D, he had help. And that being the case, from his head coach and also from another, position coach, the senior DB's coach. So it's just not. It's not quite the same thing. I don't see Fichtner getting the help that Butler was getting this year. Put it that way.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Ian, the last few minutes here, what did you find out or what did you see about Matt Canada that intrigued you or maybe didn't?
So one of the things that I'll point out is Canada's offenses have always used a lot of pre-snap motion, and the Steelers were one of the I don't want to say worse, but used pre-snap motion about the fewest of any team in the league last year. Some of that could have been the quarterback play that, when you're calling audibles and moving guys around,
simple.
It's a little bit harder. Right, you want to keep it simple, but I think bringing him in, potentially could bring some of those concepts at least into the discussion room. Him having bounced around, worked with a lot of college quarterbacks, he has experience working with young guys, and yes, we have a like Ben said, 37-year-old quarterback who is, going to be leading the team, but the guys behind him still need to be prepared too. So I think that may help them a little bit as well. Obviously, this is a guy that Mike Tomlin has a lot of familiarity with, not only working in the same building in 2016 when he was the offensive coordinator at Pitt, but also I'll point out that you mentioned he was at Maryland. He was the offensive coordinator there and then the interim head coach in 2018, which was Mike Tomlin's son Dino's senior season at Shayside Academy here in Pittsburgh. And Dino committed to Maryland to be a wide receiver. So Canada was probably heavily involved in Dino Tomlin's recruitment. So probably knows the Tomlin family very well, has a pretty good working relationship there. So, this is a guy that Tomlin has some comfort level with. And the Steelers have always liked to promote coordinators from within too. So this could be a situation where it's like, hey, if this works out, maybe he could potentially be an offensive coordinator of the future, or maybe he just stays a position coach depending on how he adjusts from the college game to the NFL, which is a big jump.
It is. It absolutely is. And I agree with you. Tomlin has always been a guy that likes familiarity. And clearly there's some sort of relationship there between his time at Pitt and then certainly with Maryland. So, I agree. I'm not going to make any judgments. I always get concerned when I see a coach that's been around as often as he has at different stops along the way. But, hopefully he's exactly what these younger guys need. I do want to get to one more little thing here before we go, and you guys can kind of do this as parting shots here. But there seems to be a real expectation after Art Rooney, too, talked today that they're going to keep Bud Dupree come hell or high water. Ben, where are you on this? Because me personally, I just don't see the math right now, but that doesn't mean it can't change.
I think it's one of two things, and I hope it's the latter of the two. I think it's either posturing, which, because Art doesn't – I don't think it's about losing face. I think it's about disappointing the fans. And I think that Art did an awful lot of posturing with Le'Veon Bell when he knew that he couldn't sign him. Yeah. And tried to keep the fans' hopes alive, not to give them false hope, but to make it clear to them that it was important to him to keep the guy too, but he just didn't think he was going to be able to do it. Even though he didn't think he was going to, he was holding out hope. So it's either that or, and this is what I hope it is, maybe Art knows something about what's coming up that we don't know. Like maybe the salary cap's going to be a lot higher than we expect, or maybe there is going to be a CBA signed before free agency starts. Maybe he knows it's coming around the bend, and if that happens, we got nothing to worry about. They can restructure a bunch of contracts and make it fit, make it work, not a problem.
Right.
And maybe he wants to put all his eggs in one basket because he's got Ben next year and he's got a good defense. And, if you got the quarterback and you got the defense, that's a pretty good recipe for a championship. So maybe he wants to get one more and just go for broke. I don't know. But I don't know what he's thinking, and he's obviously not going to tell us, but something's up.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. And Ian, go ahead and close us out. What are your thoughts on Dupree and Art too today?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like we talked about in the last show, Ben went into some good detail on it that, the last year of the collective bargaining agreement puts some constraints on what you can do from a contract standpoint and pushing money out to future years. The one thing I've been kind of bouncing around in my head is maybe they try and use the transition tag, which is a little less than the franchise tag, at least to, keep him sort of under contract for a little while and then try and work out a longer-term deal. I think the transition tag for outside linebackers is not final right now, but it's estimated around $14 million instead of $16.5 million for a franchise tag. Transition tag also gives you the opportunity if another team tries to sign him, you can match that deal. So, still let Dupree explore free agency, but the Steelers could potentially match any deal that he was given to. So, I think that would be another, like Ben said, go for broke on a 1-year deal too. Because before last season, I mean, we talked on this podcast that $9.5 million for Dupree was overpaying him. With that 5th-year option, then he went out and had 11 sacks. So, with a guy like him who didn't break out till his 5th year, you never know what you're going to get the next year. Hopefully for him he turned a corner, but that's kind of something that's been bouncing around my head.
Well, he did turn the corner and not nearly as wide as he has in past years. And I'm just going to sign off on that one right there. Thank you so much for listening to the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by 26shirts.com/Pittsburgh. And hey, go Steelers.
Ravens